All right, I want to start today with yet another reminder based on a new study that gun violence is dramatically worse in red states. One of the big narratives that is going to play a significant role in the 2024 election is that of violent crime and murder and guns, and Republicans pointing to so-called Democrat cities and suggesting that urban progressives, I guess, are responsible for violence and gun violence and crime. This is very much not true. There's a really good piece in Politico magazine called "Gun Violence is Actually Worse in Red States. It's Not Even Close." And it looks at this issue in a number of different ways. And one of the findings of the study is that gun deaths are far less common in the New York City area than in the US overall, debunking one of the very often repeated claims from the right that New York City is some kind of dangerous hellhole. And the article explains that if you grew up in the coal mining region of eastern Pennsylvania, your chance of dying of a gunshot is about half if you grew up in the coal fields of West Virginia. Similar regions, relatively rural and relatively conservative, but you have stricter gun laws in blue Pennsylvania than in red West Virginia, and you're much less likely to die of a gunshot. And as you read the article, whether you divide the country up regionally or state to state, you find that historically and presently blue areas are significantly safer when it comes to gun violence. It's beyond the scope of this segment to go through the entire piece with you, but it divides the country up into all sorts of different areas and looks at this in so many different ways. The Deep South has some of the highest rates of gun death among major regions, and it's one of the most conservative parts of the country. Great Appalachia has the highest rate of gun suicides among major regions, and that is a right-wing area. And you go on, and you find that this is, quite frankly, an undeniable reality. Now, one of the important things to remember about why this isn't going to convince the deniers, and we'll link to this in the description to the YouTube video, and I encourage you to look at it and check it out, and maybe it will change some minds. But one of the problems with this issue, and I've explained this before, is that number one, violence and crime are genuinely really complicated issues that can relate to culture, but also economics, gun laws, access to mental health services, so many different things. This doesn't mean we ignore any one aspect or focus on only one aspect. It just means it's complicated. But the trend line is that gun violence is much worse in red states. One of the things that will often happen is if you say, oh, the red states are where the problem is, you'll have some right-wingers come in and say, no, but if you look at the red states, where the real problem is in the blue cities. And of course, by sheer numbers, it can sometimes be the case that it is worse in cities. But when you look at rates that account for population density, it stops being the case. But then if you say, well, it's a blue city, but all the violence is in the areas represented by the conservative city councilors or whatever the case may be, you can zoom in or out strategically in order to get the outcome that you want. And that can also make this a difficult conversation to have. But the big story, which is conservatives blaming blue Democrat cities and urban gun violence on gangs and welfare queens, and pretending that this isn't an issue in rural and conservative West Virginia or the right-wing Deep South or whatever the case may be, is simply not true. One other thing. The right loves to talk about, Chicago and Baltimore as these crime-ridden hellholes. The truth is that even within cities that have gun violence problems, the gun violence is overwhelmingly concentrated in a few areas. Most of Chicago, most of New York City, most of Baltimore does not actually have these issues. This is aside from whether the issues relate to a particular politics or how it relates to the state or whatever the case may be. Even within these so-called dangerous cities, the violence is overwhelmingly only in certain areas. And this makes it a really difficult issue to tease out one particular cause. What we know when it comes to solving the problem is that before even, just on principle, so many on the American right don't even want to consider the fact that guns and gun availability may have something to do with it. And as I've said before, well, let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about culture. Let's talk about poverty. Let's talk about education. Let's talk about all those things. But we can't exclude guns from the gun problem. Guns have to be part of that discussion. And check out the Politico magazine piece. It's very, very good. One of our sponsors is Shortform. Shortform makes the world's best guides to nonfiction books. And not only does Shortform summarize each nonfiction book itself into key points that you can cover in just a few minutes, they have all sorts of interactive exercises to help you apply the ideas to what you've read to retain more. The guide to each book also includes intellectual insights, comparing and contrasting the book to other prominent books about the same topic so that you can contextualize the book and understand the controversies and the disagreements. They also have books across every nonfiction genre, from economics and politics to science and health. I was recently checking out James Clear's Atomic Habits on Shortform. Of course, they have the guide, but they also have highlights. They also include other similar books about habits and developing a routine with differences and similarities. Super, super useful, and a lot more than just a summary of the book. There are new guides and articles released every week, and Shortform is giving my audience a free trial plus 25% off a subscription, which is a $50 value. So for the price of a book per month, you get access to thousands. Go to shortform.com/Pacman. The link is down below.